Am I wrong for answering my narcissistic mother's message? I'm a 20-year-old. English isn't my first language, so sorry if I make mistakes. My mother is a difficult person to say the least. Growing up, she was a neglectful and narcissistic parent. My father was a pilot and my mother was a flight attendant when they met. She was 19 and he was 35. At the time, my dad had a girlfriend and my mom was the other woman. She had me when she was 25. My dad since day one has always been there for me in any way he could, but he refused to marry my mom, so I only lived with my mom, and he visited as much as he could. The thing is, my mother's lifelong dream has been to settle down and have a perfect family. With time, she started looking for that special someone. For what I hear, she was a good mom in spite of her plans not totally working, but everything changed when she met Kyle, not real name. She met him when I was 3 and fell for him hard. He promised her that he would marry her but needed time since he was a local politician. Time passed, and when I turned 6, he started acting weird towards me, hugging me more and volunteering to take me from and to school. I was okay with it until he started asking me to kiss him in the mouth to greet him or to say goodbye. I knew it was wrong when he told me to keep it between us. Things escalated when he made me touch him. At that moment, I knew I needed to tell my mom, and so I did, but she only brushed me off, telling me I was imagining things, and that he was not like that. When I kept insisting, she took me to a psychologist and told them her version before I did, so they scratched it as imagination as well. So I decided to stop telling my mom and just distanced myself from him. Later that same year, he left her as he no longer needed her to portray the perfect family. My mother was devastated. She would cry in her room for hours and stopped eating. I blamed myself, thinking that if only I let him continue, he would have stayed with her and she would be happy. After the breakup, she tried to delete herself when I was with my dad. Luckily, we lived with a friend of hers that called my dad and told him what happened. He rushed to the house and took my mom to the hospital on time. After that, he took both of us to his city and committed her to a psychiatric facility to help her. When she was discharged, my dad asked her to marry him so he could be closer to me, but she refused, saying she didn't want to be controlled by him. Things went downhill from there. She became bitter and had a very small temper. There began the years of yelling, criticism, victimization, manipulation, and neglect. She would throw glasses and plates at me if we fought, constantly tell me how my dad was a horrible person to her, and leave for hours to go to parties. I wasn't an easy child either, to be honest. I failed my classes and fought a lot with whoever I could. Later on, I discovered I had undiagnosed ADHD. But even then, I always tried to make her happy, giving her drawings and asking my dad for more money since she convinced me he was a cheapskate that gave the bare minimum. Not true. He gave her more that she asked and even paid for her first breast implants. She never bought clothes for me, school materials, and never took me to the doctor. As I grew, I always made excuses for her to my dad and his family, as I saw them often. Every school vacation, I flew to my dad's city to visit his family. I believe this is what kept me sane for so long. Life with her was hell, and when I was 10, I tried telling a friend what had happened with Kyle, and when she found out, she threatened me that if I said anything to my dad, he would lose his job. You see, he never stopped being a pilot, and he had just moved to Dubai to work. As long as I've known my dad, I understood he loved his job, and at the time my mother convinced me he loved his job more than me, so I said nothing, but this only made my depression get worse, to the point I started cutting myself, and even tried to unsubscribe to Life twice. When 2020 came, my dad lost his job and my mom sent me to him. I took this opportunity to finally tell my dad what happened and decided I would stay with him. As expected, she tried to manipulate me to convince me I needed her, but this time it didn't work. I was free. From there, our relationship became more complicated. She would beg me to talk to her. I would let her, but thing would be just as awful, so I would go NC for a while, just to repeat the cycle. Our last fight was about money, in which I decided to go NC once more. Now she is asking again to talk to her, messaging me on Instagram. She started sending me money, saying it, not a bribe for you to talk to me, and it's your fault you're losing your mother, to later beg again to go back into my life. Yesterday, she sent me yet again another message, and I just exploded and sent a long message telling her how she didn't deserve to be in my life, and that I was happy for her if she was happier now, but that I couldn't do this anymore. Now here is where I might be wrong. My best friend pointed out to me how I could have just ignored her like always instead of instigating a fight, and now I'm questioning if I'm right to accept her money but not want a relationship and getting angry she even asks for one. Tell me, Reddit, am I wrong? Now to the next story, story 2. Am I wrong for wanting to cut ties with my grandma? I, 17F, had recently gone on a 5-day trip to a family reunion. This is my second, and probably last, year going. My great-aunt really cherishes these events with our extended family, and since I'm really close to her, I decided to go. I traveled up to the reunion, which was about 4.5 hours away from my hometown, with my grandma, great-aunt, second cousin, and her 2 kids. Honestly, I probably shouldn't have gone knowing that my grandma gets really peeved around my second cousin and her kids, but thought, since we were stuck up there for almost a week, she would put on her big girl britches and move on. Granted, my second cousin isn't the easiest person to get along with, but she never intentionally tries to hurt or peeve off anyone unlike my grandma. Anyways, throughout the first 3 days of the trip I had noticed my grandma getting cross, dragging me away from the cabin to essentially escape from her sister, my great-aunt, and my second cousin, her niece, and when she did that, all she would do is complain and try to pry a shared opinion from me, which I obviously didn't share. And I honestly didn't really like spending time with my grandma because of her complaining. That set aside, it was the 4th day of the trip and me and my grandma were the only ones in the cabin. She had a migraine, so she decided to go take a nap. I stayed in the living room waiting for everyone else to get back. After a few hours of waiting and mostly sleeping, my second cousin and her 2 daughters finally come back from the pool. By this time, my grandma was awake and reading in the living room. After a while of settling down, my second aunt tells her eldest daughter, who's around my age but a little younger, to go get a shower. After a few minutes, her daughter, clearly upset, comes strolling out of the bathroom head down, clutching her phone. I wasn't really paying attention because I had my headphones on listening to music, but I briefly looked up and over at my second cousin and her daughter and saw that her daughter was crying. I quickly took off my headphones and just sat quietly trying to hear what happened, out of concern. Suddenly, I hear my grandma coming out of the bathroom saying, "Go on, cousin's daughter, go take a shower. I cleaned it." Her daughter then starts to get visibly more upset. This causes me to tense up and look back at my grandma in pure confusion. My grandma then pipes up again, "Stop being that way, it's fine. The shower's clean." My second cousin then asks what happened and what made the shower dirty in the first place. At first, my grandma doesn't answer the question, saying things like, "I'm not coming to the family reunion next year," etc., etc. She then answers after a few minutes of riling up my second cousin. My grandmother had peed in the shower, while my second cousin's daughter was in there. Sorry, meant to mention this earlier. The cabin we were in only had 1 bathroom, but there were plenty of cabin around with family members. So she could have gone somewhere else. When I heard my grandma say this, I was in absolute shock. Then that shock turned into disgust. Obviously, my second cousin got really upset after my grandma said that, and a few other things. After a while, what was a minor problem turned into a screaming match between my cousin and my grandma. Obviously, I took the initiative to get the kids out of the house because LV's seen my grandma act this way before. I've been taught to just accept her behavior at this point. Anyways, after a few minutes, my great-aunt finally arrived. I quickly briefed her what was going on while trying to maintain my composure, and she just sighed and trudged her way into the cabin. My second cousin then comes walking out with her daughters, and some of my stuff in hand, putting it into her car, my grandma following after her. At this point, my second counting, and her 2 daughters were in her van. My grandma came up to the van asking for my opinion on the matter, and I refused to answer her, trying to get her to calm down. Well, she didn't. Instead, she slammed the car door in my face, only slightly avoiding my fingers from getting crushed. At this point, I was obviously upset. She then opened the door back up and screamed, "Don't you dare call your mama." I then screamed back at her, saying that she couldn't tell me that I couldn't call my own mother, which I thought was justified in that moment. After that, she slammed the door again. And with that, my cousin pulled out and headed to our scheduled family dinner. After our dinner, everyone had calmed down. I had called my mom and dad, and they were on their way to get me. My grandma also tried to call them before I got the chance to, but luckily I called and informed them what was going on before she called. So after dinner, we all went back to our cabin, my grandma waiting and reading in the living room chair. I fled upstairs, where I had been sleeping, as soon as we got back. My grandma then called my name, and so I'll begrudgingly get up and look down at her from the top of the stairs because I thought she'd apologize. Nope, she didn't. She wanted me to apologize, even though the only thing I said to her was what I had previously said to her in the car. So turned away and went back to my room to sleep it off until she left. Her husband was coming to get her. It was been almost 2 weeks since then, and she has yet to apologize. We were supposed to get together for 4th of July, but I really wanted to go. So I told my parents I was uncomfortable going. My dad said to suck it up because LD have to deal with this kind of thing at work and such. But I don't understand how that kind of mentality applies here. This issue isn't something LD experience anywhere else but within my family. I also told them I wanted to cut her out because how she acted was not how you should treat your family, let alone your grandchild, even when you're mad. But they said she was family and I shouldn't do that. But after all of this and a few other things I learned about her, I'm not sure I consider her family anymore. Next story, Story 3. Am I, 26F, wrong for telling my fiancé, 36M, to stop communicating with his friend? My 26F fiancé, 36M, has a former friend that he had a prior sexual relationship with years ago. I say former because I asked him to stop communicating with this girl, and he did, and told her that he was in a relationship and didn't wish to talk to her any further because I asked him to. The background is he had a FWB relationship with this girl that he used to work with. He didn't want an exclusive relationship with her, and she did and expressed that one time. They were never exclusively together, but she would post Facebook posts with him and everything. They eventually decided to just be friends after a while. However, I suspect that she still wants to be more than friends for reasons I'll share. A month or two after he and I became exclusive, this girl sent a nude picture that he had gotten in the past when they were messing around years ago, prior to us dating, as a kind of remember this, and in the picture she was topless and showing a tattoo of his name that she had wanted to get at the time years ago when they were messing around but never did. He didn't comment on it and just continued to talk to her. However, he never told me about this nude that she sent him, which I felt betrayed by, because if I had a former FWB send me a naked picture, I would set the boundary that if they do it again, we'd no longer be friends and or just cut them off. But regardless, I would have definitely told. I found out months later and we had a huge fight about it because he didn't tell me, and I told him that even though he sees her as just a friend, she clearly doesn't, or she wouldn't have sent a naked picture to flirt. Then he said that she's still his friend and he's not into her and never was really. The worst part, I'm pretty sure she knew or at least suspected that he was in a relationship and didn't care to respect boundaries because she likes him. I recall him asking her for relationship advice. Anyway, I feel like my fiancé was being very naive. I definitely know how girls like this are. I tried to explain to him that this girl will probably never see him as just a friend, and because of that he needs to end the friendship. After our huge fight about it, he agreed to stop talking to her, which he told her. However, he remained Facebook friends with her. Flash forward 2 days ago. She's posting his picture unprovoked on her FB page saying she misses her friend. I told him that's weird and to be prepared for her to reach out sometime soon because of the post and either block or tell her that he's not interested in being friends. However, now we're having the same argument where he feels I don't trust him and he should still be able to be friends with this girl as long as he establishes with her that they will only be friends. And I feel betrayed because he shouldn't have any contact with this girl that clearly does not respect his relationship with his now fiancée, me. Am I wrong for being upset and telling him not to communicate with this girl, period, if she reaches out, which I know she will? I can see how it could be wrong to tell someone who they can't be friends with, but I think this a unique circumstance, and I'm justified in this stance. Now to the last story, Story 4. Am I wrong for wanting to disown my mother? Pretty much as the title says. I, 29, FTM, have had a very close relationship to my mother, 61, that I have realized is actually quite a toxic relationship. I've been realizing this over the last decade slowly. Please note I am going to talk to a therapist about this all tomorrow, as I truly feel like I've been gaslit for way too long. But I'm turning to Reddit to also ask, am I wrong? When I was little, I always wanted to be like my mother. She was my best friend who I told everything. I even dressed like her. As an adult, things have started to sour when I realized how much she likes to impose herself on my life. I thought I could live with it as I have been, but her behavior has been increasingly worse and worse. Or maybe my tolerance has just worn thin. Any boundaries I have tried to set up for myself are immediately questioned, then ignored. She will often show up at my house uninvited and unannounced for a cup of tea, or worse, to drop off their dog for me to look after. If I am not home, they will leave the dog with my cat. I have asked them not to do this. I am not kidding when I say I came home from work one evening to find both of my parents on my couch with their dog watching a movie. I asked them to leave. We ended up going out for dinner. So why stay in touch? She is my support system. She says she will always love and support me. She wants to be with me for every step of my transition. However, when she got mad at me one winter for not shoveling the driveway right away at her request, she proceeded to call me my dead name and not helpful to my elderly mother. When I got top surgery, she was horrified that I was mutilating myself. And what man could love me now? Please note, I had already come out as bi years previously and identified as non-binary at the time. When I asked if she was nervous about my upcoming histo, she responded with, realizing this is another step, irreversible step, in your transition. Sadness for me that this was not how I envisioned your life going. Sadness that you will not become a mother. Sadness for me that I will not be a grandmother to your children. Worries about your long-term future and who will be in your life in, say, 30 years' time. I won't even begin to list the red flags I saw in this message. But today was the final straw. I messaged my mother to ask when we were going to meet up with visiting family friends who are here for the summer, as I am planning the rest of my summer weekends, one of which I am planning on driving to visit friends 2 hours away. The conversation went like so, cap locks to censor identifying names. Although I doubt my mother has read it. My mother, so cat will need looking after, yes? Me, yeah, I was going to ask friend. My mother, why? Me, because I don't always want to bother you and dad. My mother, well, I want to take care of him. No one else will spend enough time with him or love him. When we are here, I expect to be asked to look after cat. I will be upset if you ask someone else. If we weren't here, it would be different. But we are here. All I would like is a thank you when you get home. I haven't responded to the message. I truly don't know how to. I'll be asking my therapist to help me word a response, but for now she has been left on read.